Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to these APM webinars by Crossrail. We're delighted to have Richard Palczynski here to talk about the Crossrail Programme Controls overview. The presentation will last for about 45 minutes and will be followed by a question and answer session, where Richard will then be joined by Julian Bartlett, Head of Cost Management, and Walter Dark, Head of Change Control at Crossrail. Without further ado, I will now hand over to Richard.
Thank you, Tuli, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Firstly, a little bit about myself. I'm civil engineer with the Institution of Civil Engineers, and I'm also a fellow of the APM. My career history is roughly split 12 years in delivery, 5 years in corporate, and today actually marks my first anniversary on Crossrail. So my experience is predominantly in design, construction, commercial management, project management, Six Sigma, program management and program controls. And for the fans out there, I'm a big rugby fan and enjoy skiing and triathlon. So why are we here? Well, a few months ago we launched the Crossrail Learning Legacy website, which was really on the back of the work done on London 2012 Olympics. It's early days for our site, but you can go and have a look at the site at learninglegacy.crossrail.co.uk, and you can also email us at learninglegacy@crossrail.co.uk. The Learning Legacy site, when you go onto it, is split on across 12 themes, organised by function. They're based on themes identified by the London 2012 Learning Legacy and have been further developed in consultation with our partners. Each item is also tagged with areas of interest, and the taxonomy is being developed with our partners to ensure alignment and enable content to be easily located, which will help provide a framework for all future learning legacies. So what's the purpose of this particular dissemination event? Well, I want to give an overview of program controls on Crossrail. I'll be talking about how we have been controlling Crossrail through the setup phase. Then we'll go into governance and we'll talk a bit about performance assurance. And at the end of it, we'll have a summary and a wrap-up session. And as Tuli was saying, you'll all have opportunities to submit questions to us. So let's start with a quick look at the program overview. I want to orientate you with what Crossrail is actually all about. What we are is the Maidenhead in the west to Shenfield and Abbey Wood in the east. We have approximately 42 kilometres of tunnels being constructed under central London. The tunnels are actually complete, and we're firmly into completion of stations and system-wide fit-out. The red on the map indicates where we have new tunnel, and blue is upgraded railway and stations. And in the normal London Underground tube map style, we've also shown the various station and tube line interchanges, of which there are obviously many. For the numbers, people, we're a fully funded programme to the tune of just under £15 billion. We're increasing capacity on the railway by 10%. The new railway is estimated to deliver about £42 billion worth of benefit to the UK economy. We have, as I said earlier, mined now 42 kilometres of tunnels. We've got 9 new stations. We've had 14,000 people working on the programme at our peak, and we've excavated some 7 million tonnes of earth. We've had 10,000 archaeological finds, many of which have been subject to BBC documentary. And finally, we're projecting to accelerate the supply of 57,000 very much needed new homes to the capital in London. Our impact on the supply chain has been quite vast. Although we're a London-based programme, the impact across the UK has been pretty wide-reaching. We've had 75,000 opportunities for business all over the UK. That has supported some 55,000 full-time equivalents. 43% of suppliers winning work are outside London and the South East, and 62% are outside London in total. 58% are small and medium-sized businesses, and 97% of our contractors are actually based here in the UK. Our impact on environment and sustainability has been very important to us. Minimising energy consumption during the construction and operational life of Crossrail has always been a key focus for the programme. Protection of the physical environment is another core component of our sustainability strategy. Probably the most tangible benefit has been through the relationship we established with the RSPB to put 3.4 million tonnes of spoil from our tunnelling operations back into beneficial use through the construction of a new bird sanctuary in the Thames estuary. That was officially completed in July last year when we breached the sea wall to allow the seas to rush in. More broadly, Crossrail has insisted that construction machinery used on our worksite complies with emissions control requirements, and that already meets the target set by the GLA for 2015. More than 80% of non-exempt construction equipment is compliant, and we continue to work to reduce exemptions and improve compliance overall. So, as I said earlier, we are a fully funded programme. We are indeed, and this slide just gives a breakdown of where that funding comes from, with the lion's share coming from Department for Transport and Transport for London. There's a very real culture on Crossrail that with this being public money, we are indeed held to a higher standard, and so we do have to constantly be aware of the need to be able to demonstrate value for money. That has been and will remain a very high priority until we complete the works in 2018. So this next slide is really a slide that we use to sort of demonstrate to people who don't know Crossrail about the scale and complexity. We pick a location, Liverpool Street, and then we superimpose on that the Circle Met line, then the Central line. We've got the Northern line coming in on the left-hand side there, and then the First Capital Connect rail routes. And then we have a little-known post office between Liverpool Street and Moorgate. So if we then superimpose what a Crossrail station looks like, this is the entirety of Liverpool that actually touch into Moorgate station and then into the existing Liverpool Street station. So as you can see, with that just being one station alone, Crossrail is a big program. So going into the program overview of how we are going to operate as a railway, our operator in 2018 when we opened stage 3 is going to be MTR. MTR currently operate the London Overground as well as railways in Hong Kong, Melbourne and Stockholm. Crossrail actually started operations as TfL Rail in May last year, taking over the existing Shenfield to Liverpool Street services. The franchise in future is going to be based on a highly successful LO structure. Essentially, MTR will be paid based on performance, which means there will be no revenue risk transfer. This partnership between the operator and TfL. As I'm sure most of you know, we will not be opening in stage 3 as Crossrail. We are now officially renamed the Elizabeth Line. So moving on to the body of the presentation, overall this slide depicts approximately 24 months on the timeline in what we've described as Crossrail's official setup phase. Starting in April 2009, running through to December in 2009, stage 1 is where we got the volume of the work in this stage done and completed. We had to define the scope and write the scope book. We had to also agree with sponsors all of our functional requirements. We had to ensure all the obligations that were agreed to in the hybrid bill were captured in that scope document, of which there were some 4,000 items. We also had to produce a detailed estimate. This took various iterations and required working with all of the different framework design consultants, of which we had about 19. We also had to do the detailed QRA, produce an assumptions register, agree the exclusions with sponsors, agree the Network Rail deliverables, as well as the scope for Canary Wharf and Berkeley Homes, as well as defining our work breakdown structure. I'll move on to stage 2. This is where we had the funding challenge. So after the government was elected in 2010, we had a comprehensive spending review across all infrastructure programs, and Crossrail at that time was challenged to the tune of something in the region of £1 billion. In response to that, we had a detailed value engineering session which was undertaken, and I will be talking in the next couple of slides about the benchmarking that was done to support that exercise. But the upshot was that by September 2010, we had received full authority to proceed. That then allowed us to move on into stage 3. Initially, there was the appointment of the program partner, as well as our program delivery partner, along with the existing and expanding Crossrail direct team, and at that time with an ever-increasing Tier 1 contracting community. The model, though, at the time wasn't really fit for purpose, and we needed to take a more integrated approach. So that was when Team Crossrail was formed over a 3-month organizational change program, and essentially what we were doing was putting the right person in the right role across the whole of the program, and that was based on a need to enable us to drive our Tier 1 community to perform better. At this time we also developed our critical measures. Crossrail basically asks 4 questions whenever we ask how we're doing. Number 1 is, are we safe? Number 2 is, are we within funding? Number 3, are we on time? And number 4 is, are we world class? From that point we went into stage 4, and stage 4 was really the final stage in the setup process, where we were getting all of the systems and procedures toolkits built and embedded within the teams and also with our contractors. In terms of takeaway for you guys listening, the big lesson learned here for Crossrail is that on a program of this kind of scale, you just can't underestimate the time and resource required for that setup stage and the effort required to complete the baseline work. I think in hindsight what we've concluded on Crossrail is that stage 4 should have really been moved forward, and the delineation of what the roles were between the program partner and program delivery partner on Crossrail, the thinking around that needed to be done much sooner. Certainly ahead of awarding those first major Tier 1 contractors. So if I take that slide and move it on to a general Crossrail timeline, you can see bottom left-hand corner there the the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, which was obviously between 2009 and into early 2011. If I just pick up on a couple of other points though, by 2012. The program controls team here on Crossrail was already into their next iteration of what controls needed to look like. They had already installed Prism as our main cost management system, but by mid-2012 we were on to a new version of Prism, which was really helping us to redefine what our processes were. Through 2013, 14, and 15. Crossrail will also continue to make changes just to adapt to the needs of the program and to respond to the challenges from our Crossrail board. A couple of examples, I'd probably highlight the new style board report which we introduced in 2013. That was a very slimmed down version of what was previously a 100+ page document, down to sort of around 50 pages, to provide only the information necessary to inform the board and to promote critical debate. In early 2015 there was another small reorganization on Crossrail when our area teams switched from being geographically focused to being discipline focused, and so our terminology switched from areas to sectors. And then later that year we took another look at the effectiveness of our performance measurement and launched earned, schedule and what we called then a substantive earned value, in order to bolster confidence in our performance monitoring whilst we were in the midst of resolving the commercial issues that we were having on the program at the time. So just coming back to that benchmarking to support the funding approval process, as I mentioned, we had to do a lot of work to demonstrate value for money, and so benchmarking has been key to Crossrail, and our team has used information from other major programs from both here in the UK and in London, as well as big programs across the rest of the globe. What we're looking for obviously is comparative data analysis. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, as it's going to be covered in a future webinar that we have on commercial assurance, but here's another example of the type of benchmarking that was done at the time to support our funding requirements. We looked at spatial metrics to compare cost against things like floor area and station volume and passenger numbers. So I want to move now on to talking about the actual of Crossrail and program controls itself. So we have our Crossrail hierarchy, which is into the Crossrail program, and as I just hinted, the program is then split into sectors. Sectors are split into projects, and then projects are split into contracts, and underneath the contracts we have our control accounts and work packages. But from a controls perspective, what's absolutely essential is that we get our work breakdown structure and our cost breakdown structure and our organizational breakdown structure completely aligned. So what we've done, what we spent an awful lot of time and effort on here is to make sure that when we procure the works, we've procured everything that fits into this alignment structure between WBS, CBS and OBS. From a systems point of view, you can't do anything without tools, so I think you could spend an entire webinar just talking about systems and tools on their own. But the tools that we bought, they were standard tools. We have not spent any significant amounts of time or effort customizing any of the tools. But as I said earlier, it's taken time and effort to get the setup right and to get it running smoothly. And so I think the lesson learned here is if you're going to be using significant systems, you do need to be talking about a 12 to 18 month window to really get the tools right. I will give you a quick run through though from a cost perspective. We are using Prism G2. From an accounting perspective and how we pay our bills, we're using SAP. Revo is the tool that we use for all of our health and safety and performance data. We have the Bentley Contract Admin Suite, which is where we do all of our contract documentation. And probably won't come as a surprise to many of you, we are using Primavera P6 for all of our schedule information. So above all of that, we have a Crystal Data Warehouse sitting on top of that, and then from the Crystal Cube, as we call it, we have business intelligence software. We've got ClickView. We don't always use ClickView, but ClickView is one of our main BI tools. But the point here is, we had to develop the systems and specifications and procure essentially an integrated suite of standard systems. So just as a reminder to ourselves, the role of program controls, as far as I'm concerned, is to provide accurate information. The second point is that controls needs to act as the conscience for Crossrail, and we also need to provide performance analysis and recommendations to support better decision making. That's essentially it. Those are the priorities. We do that by being good at pulling information from all different sources together through systems predominantly, but also through communications and meetings and site visits. Crossrail works on a 4-week cycle, and so what I would say is that the program controls team on the whole is out and about to various different locations during 2 of those 4 weeks. We place a lot of emphasis on getting out to the project sites and actually going to the coalface and seeing for ourselves exactly what's going on. So in terms of the way in which our reporting structures work, the general flow of information can be summarized on this slide. So if you follow me here and go from the bottom of the page up, we begin with contractors submitting their periodic information into their respective teams. Each team then takes that information and updates their core systems accordingly. From that point on, it becomes a centrally controlled effort to extrapolate from our Crystal Data Warehouse what information we need in order to be able to inform the hierarchies above. And that begins with creating the Crossrail project dashboards, and then after that we create a whole host of other reports in order to answer the fundamental questions of are we safe, are we within funding, are we on time, and are we world class? So this is an example of the dashboard that we get our main Tier 1 contractors to populate their information on every period. Every single Tier 1 contractor follows this same process, and they all submit their information in this way. We designed the report, which is Excel based on the building blocks of everything we need from health and safety, schedule, cost information, quality information, and so on. What that allows us to do, though, as I hinted in the previous slide, is it allows us to produce here in the center for our project teams a project dashboard. And what we give them, and it takes about half a day to produce all of the project dashboards, we give them a data-rich dashboard, which you can see depicted at the top of the slide. What we then ask the project teams to do is to simply supply their written commentary onto that dashboard. And so once we merge the two together, we end up with a full data-rich dashboard, which we then bring into our program delivery board, which we sit for 2 days every single period, and we go through every single major project on Crossrail. We spend somewhere between 30 minutes and 45 minutes on each project, dissecting what has happened in the period. At the beginning of 2015, though, we started to, for the first time, show project performance information side by side on one page. And I will say, this has been a complete game changer in the sense that it's genuinely sparked interest in comparative analysis, and it's made people look at information in a way that they hadn't previously done so. So by visualizing each project, it's become very easy to spot problem areas and to highlight changes in performance and where on the program they have happened. Another great tool that Crossrail has available to it is the planning page. It's a single intranet site that allows people with the right access rights to view on a daily basis updates, either daily, weekly or periodic progress on various key commodities. So I just thought I'd pick out a couple of examples to show you. Here's how we're monitoring daily progress on platform edge screen installation. We track percentage completion, and we do it across all of the key stations, and we highlight which stations are in play right now, what work has already been done, and what the key dates are. If I was to pick another one, daily track progress, so we can see very quickly how much track has actually gone down in each of the locations that we're working. And as I said, this is actually updated every single day. And so it has become a very valuable tool for all levels of people in the organization on Crossrail. So one of the questions I get asked, is, how effective is Crossrail being? Well, on this slide we've highlighted some types of actions that have resulted directly from the information collected and reported by program controls. If I just pick an example, milestone tracking. Through the schedule data collected by the planning team, we were able to demonstrate that we had been importing risk into the handover milestones. That led directly to a change in our system-wide area, and ultimately we've ended up with a supplemental agreement with the contractor in order to realign dates and incentivize milestones going forward. I'm not going to go through each of these, but remember what I said earlier about the purpose of the controls team, which was to act as the conscience and to provide information to facilitate better decision making. That's really what it's all about. Another aspect of controls has been the drive in actively challenging costs across the program. Since last October, we've been pushing very hard on finding efficiency savings and looking for any type of savings in order to reduce costs. We manage that centrally through program controls through a process that we've referred to as glide paths. Essentially, we capture value savings from any source, whether it's value engineering, Six Sigma risk reduction, wherever it comes from, we track it cumulatively in one place. How do the savings become real? Well, we push the savings through our risk and change control process, and that gives us full audit trail and full transparency on what we're doing. So let's move on now and talk a little bit about governance. I've put up here the Crossrail governance map. It's a rather complex diagram, but essentially what I want you to look at here is the way in which governance is split. So if you look at those top 6 grey boxes, starting with the board and our executive committee and the 4 main subcommittees below that, the point I want to make here is that those meetings are where we have formal governance going on. And how do we define that? Well, essentially, as long as the meeting itself is corporate, then that meeting has the ability to make decisions. Below that, all of the other boxes that you see here, whether it's the Programme Delivery Board or the Railway Integration Authority or the Railway Systems and Ops Programme Board, they are what we call operational meetings. The meeting itself doesn't actually have any authority. any decisions that get made in those meetings are made by people who are exercising their own delegated authority under what Crossrail calls its scheme of delegated authorities. And that's an important distinction to make. So how do you actually implement governance on a program like this? Well, we've established it through 5 key areas. Number one, you absolutely have got to have a very clear terms of reference. Number two, defining the delegated authority for each meeting and the scheme of authorities, so that is the delegated authority that each individual person has. Number three is through the implementation of the controls processes themselves. Number four, through a check and balance assessment, really, via performance assurance. And then the fifth stage really is through the use of the tools and systems that actually enable the processes to flow and to be tracked. You saw this pyramid on a previous slide, but just as a reminder, again at the very top we have our main client and sponsors. Then we have the Crossrail Programme, and that's split into our control areas, which should actually correctly be control sectors. And then we have our projects, our Tier 1 contracts, and our control accounts and work packages below that. Under any governance structure, though, you absolutely have to have, actual financial delegated authorities, and this is a simple outline diagram just to show what Crossrail's key levels of authority are. The only thing I'll say is that whatever levels you choose, they've got to facilitate decision making to happen, which means that in order to get to get the levels right, you've got to have a good handle on change control so that you can get a feel for the volume of issues arising with respect to each level. So on Crossrail, if I start at the bottom left, our project managers have authority up to £250,000, and then above the project at sector level, our sector directors, they have authority up to £1 million. That increases to £10 million for people working at the program level, and then beyond £10 million, that then has to go into commercial and change subcommittee, which can approve anything up to £25 million. If it's above £25 million, it then by default has to go to Crossrail's board. So to help with that, I've got a simple slide here that gives us some clues as to where change comes from on Crossrail and how we actually go about handling it. So in terms of drivers of change, some types of change affect project budget, other types don't. Scope is a clear example where project budgets have to change accordingly. How we handle and track change, though, is through a risk process that then feeds a trend process, and ultimately that then drives the formal change control process. Different types of change are implemented through different mechanisms. So, for example, investment authority, that's reserved only for the commercial and change subcommittee and Crossrail board. So as other items can be closed out much more simply through the trend process, subject to having the right level of delegated authority in place. The last topic I want to move on to is only going to take a couple more minutes, and then we'll get into some Q&A. But I want to talk about performance assurance for a couple of seconds. Just over 3 years ago, we did establish our performance assurance process, which was designed to assess and benchmark performance across the supply chain working on Crossrail. Now, I don't want to steal the thunder from a future webinar which is going to be dedicated to this process, so I'll give you the 60-second overview, which is to say that we've essentially implemented an assessment criteria across 6 key areas: commercial, health and safety, environment, quality, community relations, as well as social sustainability. And what we do is we go out and we spend quite a bit of time assessing each of the contractors alongside our project teams, and we come up with a score, and then that score essentially locates each assessment into one of 4 zones. So the worst zone, the major improvement zone, and from there you can go into the potential improvement zone, Following that, we want to see people getting into the value-added zone, and ultimately what we're looking for is people to get into the world-class zone. After each assessment, we then plot each of the suppliers' performance on the same chart accordingly, and then we compare the results. So what you're looking at here is the cumulative summary for the last 5 rounds that Crossrail has done. We're currently going through round 6 right now, but we do this about every 6 months on Crossrail. And so what we've seen over the last few years is a progressive migration towards the value-added zone and beyond. So you can see from the graph, round 1 average was, just on the average compliance line, but round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5 have progressively migrated up towards the top right-hand side. So in summary then, this whole thing is about lessons learned, and so I think I would just run through quickly what we think some of the key lessons learned for Crossrail are in each of the stages that we've been working in. So during setup and design, I think the key points to take away here is the need to establish the initial controls baseline, establish a strong set of program vision and values, then an emphasis on reviewing and updating program structure as it matures and develops, defining design management responsibility and the interface with delivery itself, and also creating a commercial conscience for the designers. If I move into the control phase, I think the key lessons we would focus on would be around establishing controls early, making sure that you spend time and effort and money on the control systems before the main contracts works are procured. A big thing for Crossrail is trusting the initial estimates as being a good indicator of what the should cost look like, and then provisioning for this outcome within the project budgets. You have to develop a procurement model that is simply not based on lowest price. So you've got to have a look at technical capability as well as price. And then finally set the right commercial environment and risk allocations through the contracts themselves. In the delivery phase, we'd make a few points around, first of all, clearing the path to enable delivery to happen quickly, engaging early with the utilities. That's been a big thing for Crossrail. Get the surveys on utilities done early before construction work starts. And also, it's been hugely important to establish a culture of performance improvement at the outset and make sure that it's part of the contract terms and conditions. In the final phase, although we're still going through it now ourselves, some key things to focus on would be around establishing a robust and detailed interface and handover requirements that all parties sign up to, and that's pretty important, making sure that everyone signs up to it. Then you've got to define the requirements of the operational readiness as soon as possible, link testing and commissioning activities to the operational readiness plan. You've got to ensure the involvement of third-party stakeholders and operators, make sure you build plenty of float into the testing and commissioning phase, and then conduct assurance on contractors' closeout of obligations. This is something that we're spending an awful lot of time on right now. Essentially we're just under 2 years away from where we will be opening Crossrail to the general public, and we're already really starting to think about, do we have the right documentation in place to be able to, for example, demonstrate that we've built a safe railway? And I think finally, from a closeout perspective, progressively closing out contracts in order to avoid dispute resolution, that's something that we have been doing on Crossrail. But I think we've all worked on programs where that has not been done, and so yeah, I think that would be something key to avoid. So that's the presentation over with. We're going to go on to a Q&A session now, but before we start that, I would just draw your attention to the future webinars that Crossrail is hosting. We may be doing more, I don't know, but at the moment we have risk management. We have a webinar on reporting, one on planning, one on commercial assurance, and as I was just saying, one is going to be dedicated to performance assurance. All of these webinars are going to be posted on the APM website, so you can just go to apm.org /events, where you will see the schedule of events in the same way that you've signed up for this one. And I would make one last pitch for you to all go and have a look at the learninglegacy.crossrail.co.uk site. So with that, I will ask Tulimar to intervene again, and we can open up to some Q&A.
Great, thank you, Richard. First question, in the reporting hierarchy, how old is the information that is presented at board level? How many periods does it take to consolidate the report all the way up through the hierarchy?
It takes days, periods. So as I was saying, we work on a 4-weekly cycle. Essentially, we have all of our information locked down at the end of week 4. We do our assessment of that information and check and balance in week 1. And then by the end of week 1, we have published our project dashboards to all of the project teams. And at the beginning of week 2, we spend all day Tuesday and Wednesday going through each individual project review. And between the close of that session on Wednesday, we have our draft board report produced and issued out to our executive committee by the end of that week. And at that point, the board report only becomes subject to minor tweaks based on feedback from XCOM. So in total, how long does it take? In terms of real effort, I'm going to say somewhere between 4 and 5 days.
Okay, great. Thank you, Richard. Next question. What were the challenges in redesigning the board report for the iPad, and what were the benefits?
So I would say, the main challenge was really trying to figure out what the board actually want to see, first and foremost. And with a mix of board members, all of whom have their own priorities as to what they want to see, trying to get a consensus on what they actually really want and what they will sign off on. I think that was probably the biggest challenge. And I think, I wasn't here at the time, but I think the main lesson coming out of it was there comes a point where you simply have to try and interpret for yourself what you think the board needs to see. And so I think we got to a point where a lot of the content was designed here in the centre and simply given to the board as a fait accompli, and they then, over a course of several periods, gave their respective feedback, and the report was tweaked accordingly.
Great, thank you. Now, the next question, they ask, how have you defined world class?
That's a very interesting question. I'm gonna introduce Julian and Walter here to see if they've got any particular input into this. I'll give my 10 cents worth on this. Through the performance assurance process, we know what we've asked for in the contract. That is the baseline. That is the minimum expectations. So when the tier ones have come on board and signed their contract, everything that is written down in the contract that they have to provide, that is what we've taken as the minimum expectations. World class is then producing those extra bits and pieces that help Crossrail in a way that we didn't previously anticipate. And I think, if I'm truthful, the exact definition of it, we still don't necessarily know. We just continue to seek better performance, better quality from our contractors, reducing rework to an absolute minimum, comparing ourselves to other major programs. So, for example, on health and safety, we look at the industry average for health and safety stats. We take that, we compare ourselves to those industry average stats, but we also compare ourselves to other major programs like London 2012 that had outstanding safety performance. And we simply ask ourselves, how are we doing against previous major programs like that?
Julian Bartlett here. The only thing that I'd add to that, I think that's pretty comprehensive, but I think we like to give, as part of the world class, a bit of visibility to the items that generally go unsung or below the radar on major programs. So I've got a copy of our board report here, and in there we sort of say that it's covering quality, resource planning and performance, social, sustainability, external affairs, environment, regulatory approval, transition and legacy. So learning legacy is part of our world-class metrics. So those things that sort of major programs have the ability to do that don't necessarily get done on another major job, I would say, is what we sort of classify as world-class, and sharing that knowledge, sharing that data, and giving some visibility to those sort of the people that work hard to deliver a program but are not there in the sort of the schedule and cost metrics that are always well publicised.
Great, thank you, Julian and Richard. The next question is, what is the level of involvement of contract representatives in the overall governance structure?
Okay, so I'm going to assume that you mean level of involvement from the Tier 1 contractors themselves.
Sure.
So in terms of the formal governance, and if I go back to that governance map slide where I had the the board and executive committee, our Tier 1 contractors obviously don't sit in any of those governance meetings. However, we have regular contractor meetings, whether it's our CEO forum or whether it's our health and safety forums, where we invite all of the contractors to come in one day every period and participate as a group of Tier 1 contractors. I don't know if Walter's probably got something else to add on this one.
Yeah, Walter, I was just going to add that the contractor compliance with the governance process is a key part of the contract, and there's a lot of detail in the works information about producing those dashboards and tying in the contractual compensation event and early warning process to our governance.
Great, thank you.
With that's a better answer than the one I gave.
Thank you. Okay, the next question they ask, can you please expand on what you mean by commercial conscious? How receptive were the contractors to the culture of performance improvement? Okay,
so a very good question. If you're referring to the slide where I talked about the program controls acting as the conscience for the job, what I really mean by that is, we need to look clinically at what the data is actually telling us, not what we think it's saying, not trying to interpret that, but facing, recognizing good things as well as the bad. We always talk in program controls about not hiding bad news or dealing with problems as soon as possible. That's one of the things that we have to do in controls, is to make sure that if we see a problem, that problem is identified and it's discussed, and just to make sure that it's not brushed under the carpet in any way. And that's not to say that it ever is, because I think on Crossrail everybody follows the same mantra of dealing with problems as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Okay, so performance assurance wasn't in our original contracts. It was something that was put in later and agreed, but they were very much engaged, very much consulted on that whole framework and the model that was put together. So they were brought on with it. I suppose some were more resistant than others initially, but I think when we started to use it and sort of explain the benefits, they sort of got on board with it pretty quickly, and some have used it within their own businesses. So that come up in the other webinar that Richard mentioned in more detail.
I was just going to add that a league table of the results of the performance assurance measures was published and shared between the main contractors. That proved to be a highly motivational aspect of the performance assurance process.
Great, thank you. Now, question was, what was the level of work instruction in getting the contractors and subcontractors on board with the level of project controls cost and planning required for your dashboards?
So the way I'm going to interpret that question is, how much information went into the works information itself around, what the contractors needed to do in order to be able to comply with our program controls requirements. And I'm going to say, it was pretty comprehensive, really. The works information essentially, detailed out in great detail what was actually required, and it was backed up by templates that were provided to the contractors as to how they would go about doing things like quantity unit rate reporting, as well as obviously the earned value stuff. We procured earned value based on the very standard APM earned value calculations. We didn't mess around with them. We didn't do anything that you wouldn't read in a standard earned value textbook. We've never had a situation where we've had to go back and issue additional instruction because the contractors were not giving us something that we then suddenly found that we needed. So I'll say that we did a very comprehensive job of procuring through the works information what it was that we actually needed. I think the question that wasn't asked, which probably would be useful to go through, is the fact that just because we procured it didn't necessarily mean that all of the tier ones were in a situation from day one to be able to understand or know how to comply with what it was that we were asking. So there have been cases where we've had to sit down with the tier ones and walk them through exactly what it was that we were asking them to do, and give them some help on how they might go about doing it, and in some cases how they need to work with our teams in order to be able to complete the requirement.
Just one final point on that. I think as we've got greater percentage complete on contracts, we've also been pretty flexible in those requirements, in that we've backed off of some of those requests that we had initially as they become less important as the project continues. So maintaining that flexibility has been important.
Lovely. How many of the processes developed to control the program were developed from scratch, i.e. specific to Crossrail, versus those brought across from your time on other programs organizations?
Julian, I think they all were developed from scratch. It goes without saying that you never start with a blank sheet of paper on these things. There's always something from somewhere, whether it's Olympics or Terminal 5 or any other sort of multitude of major program that people had worked on. But I think Crossrail was so different that they were all refined and developed to a much greater level of detail than we had before, and very specific to the Crossrail requirements. So all of our processes were written from scratch. But I think the important thing is that they don't, as Richard's already mentioned, they don't really stray too far away from what we perceive as industry norms, certainly with regard to things like earned value and how we build schedules and all that sort of stuff. Everything is what we'd expect. It's just writing it down and in the Crossrail way, I suppose. So that everyone, when we're going out to that number of people in the supply chain, we needed a Crossrail way of doing things, because everyone does things slightly differently. So we needed to dictate how we wanted to see it for consistency, so we could analyze the data in the right manner.
I think one of the things I would say is that, as I mentioned in the very opening couple of slides, we launched our Learning Legacy site a couple of months ago. We will be uploading more and more content to that site as we get through 2016, 2017. I am very conscious of what processes, what documents we put up there, because as Julian just said, we've written stuff that has been very specific to the needs of Crossrail. And whilst that is good for Crossrail, it may not necessarily be helpful for people logging onto the Learning Legacy website and pulling down a document and thinking that that is the way that they need to do it. I think I'll be much more in making sure that we give some clear guidance to people using the Learning Legacy website on how they can take the principles of what we've done from our processes and best use them, whether they're on a small project or a medium-sized project or on a program approaching something like the scale of Crossrail. In terms of mega programs, the world of mega programs certainly here in the UK is very small, and without the Learning Legacy, putting that to one side, we have already been sharing our core suite of processes with other big programs. So we have had a sharing arrangement with jobs like High Speed 2 as well as Thames Tideway.
Okay, we only have now time for one final question, and that is, how do you carry out design management and ensure accuracy of reporting?
So you saved the hardest question till last. Thank you for that, Julie. Well, okay, so design management is managed through a gate process. I think one of the things that Controls has done a good job of highlighting early on is that where we've had schedule pressure on completion of designs, we have essentially pointed out the need, and the program has reacted to breaking down those gates into what we call mini gates. So you know, where design has shown signs of potentially delaying construction activity, because of course, you know, we're not building off a completed design, we are designing and building as we go in some cases. You know, we have moved to a mini gate process in order to be able to get the necessary parts of the design out to the contractors in order to minimize construction delays as much as possible. You know, on the main design, we have been using essentially what we call engineering progress and performance reporting, EPPR, which is essentially a form of earned value to manage or provide visibility on the progress of design. So, you know, at each key stage of the design, we assign a fixed percentage completion, and then once that part of the design is signed off, it earns that amount of progress.
Fantastic. Well, that concludes the session. So thank you all for joining us today, and a special thank you to you, Richard, for your presentation.